This is the Podcast. The kids of Elm Street don't know it yet, but something is coming to get them.
There's something out there, isn't there?
You just see cuts happening.
What did that, Lieutenant?
I don't know.
Tina! What's the coroner got to say? He's in a jar and puking since he saw it.
They're gonna kill me for sure.
Did you do it?
There was somebody else there.
He was locked in a room with a girl who went in alive and came out in a rubber bag.
No one knows where it came from or who it will visit next.
Nancy? There's something wrong with you. You're imagining things.
Nightmare on Elm Street.
Do you believe in the boogeyman?
No.
Whatever you do, don't fall asleep.
She's the only one who can stop it. If she fails,
I'm your boyfriend now, Nancy.
no one will survive. From Wes Craven, director of The Hills Have Eyes and Last House on the Left, a new masterpiece in fantasy terror, Nightmare on Elm Street.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the ATI Podcast. We're hopping in here for episode 128, and we're bringing back our good friend, filmmaker, MANDO FRANCO. How are we doing, MANDO?
I'm good, man. Go ahead and tell me more about me. I'm down to hear it.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, MANDO's going to help Jake and I from waxing on with R&J. We had Ridge on the podcast last week. Now we've got Jake. You're getting a double dose of Jackson back-to-back weeks here.
I like it.
And we're going to be tackling A Nightmare on Elm Street for its 40th anniversary. Guys, I'm really excited about this one. This is
Me too.
way up there for me as far as movies in general, let alone horror movies. This is probably in my top 10 movies of all time.
Yeah.
Really excited to talk about it tonight.
Definitely my top 5 all-time favorite horror films for sure.
Yeah.
I watched it again last night just to refreshify my memory. Even though I have the movie pretty memorized and it's imprinted in my head, I still wanted to watch it again. I watch it typically. I watch at least one of the Freddy movies every October. Every October I do the 31 days of horror movies. I watch 31 horror movies. I've been able to watch a movie a day, but some days I watch 2 or 3. So I'm just doing 31 movies in October, not 31 days of it. So
Yeah.
I'm trying my best. It's hard working full
Now,
time,
I know-
being a dad, and everything.
Absolutely. I know how it goes. I always tell myself I'm going to do it every year, and I fall into the same trappings. Let me ask you, Mondo, do you follow like those, sometimes they put out those recommended calendars for people to follow, like, or film lists. Do you just kind of do your own selections, or do you like subscribe to any of that sort of deal?
I literally tried last year. I'm like, oh, this will be cool. And I got like 2 days in, and then I just like fell off because I couldn't keep up with the particulars.
Yeah.
I mean, I know a lot of people do the particular calendar, and it's a great idea. I just got such a crazy schedule half the time. I can't keep up with it, you know?
Right.
So I tried, and I couldn't keep up with it. So I tend to kind of just do my own thing every year. However, I got to say this year, there's been so much content coming out, like stuff in theaters and just stuff streaming.
Yes.
I've watched so many new things this month.
Terrifier 3?
Yeah, I did see that in theaters. I saw it opening day in theaters. I did a double feature that day. I went to go see Saturday Night, the SNL movie, and then I jumped into Terrifier 3, which was
How was the
pretty
SNL
fun.
movie?
Great, man. Definitely in my top
Nice.
5 for the year. It's so good.
Oh, nice.
And I'm a big
Oh, yeah,
SNL
I'm pretty excited
fan.
about it.
The
Yeah,
guy
me too.
the cast is perfect. There's not a bad performance in it. The guy that does Chevy Chase is perfect.
I think it's really special
Dan
that they got
Aykroyd.
Ivan Reitman to direct the film as well. You know,
Oh, Jason Reitman? Yeah.
or his son, right?
Yeah.
Oh my God, I do that still.
I do it too.
say one or the other.
Dad brain. I got it, man. Same thing.
Yeah,
I do it
dad
all
brain
the
for
time.
sure. So, of course, this is actually going to be our last episode and observation of our special most favorite month of the year, and that's Halloween. And we do it big here on the ATI Podcast. We've done 6 programs just on the ATI Podcast, and not including what else going on our network this month that's been dedicated to Halloween. So it's been quite the busy month for us. And we're closing it out with a strong one, 1984's A Nightmare on Elm Street, directed by Wes Craven. Just going to kind of lay out what the format is for tonight's discussion. If you guys have watched one of our film review shows before, you might be familiar with that. But, somebody's maybe watching this for first time as well. So I'm just going to lay that out real quickly for folks. We're going to give you a quick synopsis of what the film is in the event that you've never seen it or need a refresher. We're going to talk about the analytic pieces of the movie as well as the news and notes relative to the movie prior to getting into what actually happens in the film and kind of those spoil-filled details regarding what takes place in the film as well. So we're going to end things with like a recap discussion. We'll talk about things that worked well for us. We're going to answer the age-old question, does the movie stand the test of time? I think we probably all know where we're going to be leaning in that direction already. And then we'll talk about what you gentlemen have going on in your own personal endeavors as well to wrap things up. So
yeah,
going to be a fun conversation tonight. We thank you all for joining us. And I'm just going to get things kicked off with a very quick synopsis of the film. So the film is based on teenager Nancy Thompson, who must uncover the dark truth concealed by her parents after she and her friends become targets of a serial killer with a bladed glove in their dreams, in which they can die, and it kills them in real life. I'd really like to get us warmed up, guys, with just talking about what our first awareness was of A Nightmare on Elm Street. What is the first thing that struck you? Maybe it wasn't even necessarily this first film, but how would you say that you remember first realizing who Freddy was or seeing who Freddy was? What was that like for you, Mondo?
I learned about Freddy at a way too young age. My uncle decided to put it on for me when I was like 4. And I mean, I don't know if he was like, I'm going to show you this. It's like, I'm going to watch this movie and this kid's here. And oh, well,
Sure.
I don't think he was trying to be malicious, but that I can fully and confidently say with sincerity that it destroyed my childhood. Like, I was not into horror films until I was like 17. There are a lot of people that say that they love horror movies and they like I've seen Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Evil Dead and when I was 5 and I grew up with it and it's my favorite movie all the time. No, man, like it destroyed my childhood. The 2 things that stood out to me the most were the fact that this guy can get you while you were sleeping, which was as a 4-year-old, I didn't fully understand the concept of dreaming and him getting you in your dreams. I understood just sleeping and my sheets coming to life and strangling me. That's what I caught. So I wouldn't sleep with covers for the longest time. And then I would take showers. I wouldn't take baths because I thought if I was in the bathtub, Freddy was going to drag me down. Like the pool, the tub would become this giant black abyss.
Pool of sorts.
Yeah. And then, and then we get a shot of my tickle bitties, like, when I'm being pulled down. So
little baby mama, no titties.
Yeah. My mitts, my man. So those were the 2 things that stood out the most. It was just this guy all in silhouette and would get you while you were sleeping. And it fucked up my childhood, man. That's like honestly what I could say. And that kept me off horror movies for most of my young life.
I could see that. I had a similar experience when I was a kid, but I saw my first horror movie that I remember seeing was probably Child's Play. And that just kind of started this hunger inside me to see like the most depraved, messed up shit. I don't know. And I'm still like trying to scratch that itch today. But there was a point in my childhood though that I saw Gremlins 2, not Gremlins 1. Gremlins 2 fucked me up. And
really?
For whatever, I had kind of this hybrid of, I had an uncle die close to the same time. Mm-hmm. And right before he died, I'd say about a week, maybe 3 weeks at most, I had a dream that gremlins could change into people. And really the gremlins essentially had the powers of Freddy Krueger, though. That's where this kind of relates, is they were able to do things in your dreams and make them happen, essentially, or transform into various objects and people. And I had a dream that they killed my uncle. So, and then my uncle dies tragically in a car accident like 2 or 3 weeks later, and he was like my best friend as well. So it just totally fucked me up. Yeah. And so I stayed away from the Gremlins movies in general. Even though it really had nothing to do with the Gremlins, that's not what they were about or what actually happened in the movies. I watched them and I knew what happened to them, but I just associated the Gremlins with that. And it wasn't that they necessarily scared me; they just reminded me of that traumatic event in my life. So,
yeah, man, it's just the notion.
Kind of a little weird sidebar.
They symbolize this notion of not what is, but what could be in your mind. So yeah, I get that. Oh, that's terrible, man. I'm sorry. That's
Yeah, it was rough. I actually never probably rewatched any of the Gremlins films until probably about maximum like 8 years ago. Like
wow.
seriously, that recent. Yeah.
Ridge is still terrified of Gremlins as well.
Really?
Yeah, he's like he can't watch that, and I've like never understood it. But
Well,
you
it's
know,
funny because originally those started off as like hard R monster movies, and
Right.
they just got, you know,
They took
yeah,
a
they got watered.
campy turn.
Yeah, it got watered
Yeah.
down because I think originally like Gizmo was supposed to turn and die at the end originally, I think. But it was a very different movie with like decapitations and hard R-rated kind of stuff, which would have been cool. Like it's
Yeah.
kind of curious to see what would have happened with that.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Jake, what's your first recollection of knowing who Freddy Krueger was or the Nightmare on Elm Street movies were?
So I'm a little younger here, 27, and I discovered Freddy Krueger
the
and
baby.
Jason and Michael Myers and all that on which they still do it to this day. And we actually at Furnace Fest a couple weeks ago in the hotel caught a little bit of the October like weekend marathon that they do of like the slasher films. So my first was just channel surfing as a kid and seeing Freddy Krueger on AMC and just being terrified. He terrified me the most out of Jason, Michael, Chucky, because he could get you in your dreams. That's what terrified me. Michael Myers would only haunt you in Haddonfield, and Jason would haunt you at Camp Crystal Lake, and Chucky was a doll. But this dude would haunt you in your dreams. So it's just like that's what terrified me. And the chalkboard, the nails, the scratching, didn't like any of that. So Freddy was always the scariest to me. That's my first memories of seeing him watching the movies as a child.
I don't ever not remember knowing who Freddy Krueger was. And I think maybe actually the first Freddy Krueger movie that I watched from start to finish might have been Dream Warriors, actually.
My favorite. Sorry. Dream Warriors has always been my favorite.
You know, it's a cult classic, man. I feel like most people gravitate towards that one, apart from the first, totally.
Sure. But once I did see, and I couldn't, again, tell you exactly when, probably pre-teen years, maybe even before that, saw the first Nightmare on Elm Street, I was like, this movie's incredible. That's why it's kind of weird now to look back at what came out 15 years ago, and it seems I know for probably Mondo and I, seems a little bit more fresh in the sense of like, it doesn't seem like it came out that long ago. Versus, you see a movie that came out either the year you were born or before you were born. In this case, for me, I'm 37, so this is, I came 3 years after the film came out. To look at that at the time that I watched it, and yeah, that was quote unquote an old movie, seemed old, but now here it is 40 years later, and it's really just left an impression on me even from that first viewing. I've probably seen this movie probably in the double digits, I'd say, probably like 10 plus, for counting partial watches, because, films like this, back to what Jake was talking about, a lot of movies that I caught originally too would be through these film marathons that would take place on cable channels or whatever the case is, or if my dad had pirated a VHS copy of something, he was very big into renting movies and then pirating them as he was watching them, doing the old VCR cloning. Just the old school shit. And we had cabinets and cabinets, walls and walls of VHS movies that we'd only seen once, and just in the event that he would ever want to watch it again, he was ripping those tapes. So we had all the Nightmare on Elm Street films. So then I went back and watched all of them. And I remember whenever New Nightmare came out and we rented that on VHS as soon as it hit the VHS.
What is that, like 6, 7?
Seven.
Yes. Okay.
94, I believe, is the year.
Is that the one where he rides a broom?
No, that's 6. That's Freddy's Dead.
Okay,
yeah. That's right before. That might be the worst one in my opinion.
Yeah, that one's pretty bad.
Yeah, that one's not great.
Hey guys, Freddy's dead. That's the last line of the movie. That's literally how it ends. Like, hey guys, Freddy's dead.
New Nightmares actually started to get a bit of a cult status to it as well. It's got quite the underground following.
I fucking love New Nightmare.
I do too.
I've always been on that train. When I started watching horror movies, I started getting into the Freddy films and watching all of them. So for me, favorites are Part 1, Part 7, New Nightmare. And unpopular opinion, I love Part 2. No one likes Part 2. I love Part 2, and then it's got to be 3, Dream Warriors. Like, it's just,
yeah.
I love the shit out of New Nightmare, though.
Yeah, Dream Warriors would be my second. Third would be New Nightmare, and then 2 would be my fourth, probably.
I like Dream Master a lot, too. 4.
You're the only one.
I was going to say, I'm not big on that one.
I mean,
it's
not, I don't know, we can get controversial here.
Well, it's all these slasher franchises kind of do that, they kind of, they have their moments still, even in the quote-unquote bad ones, right? So, whether you're there for the kills or the shitty dialogue or there's something. There's always something. The practical effects, maybe. I will say that each of them have something still yet.
You know what? I was gonna say that. I mean, that's the one thing I could say about the franchise. Dream Warrior is Dream Master. Sorry, even all of them like have really good effects.
Yes.
Like They may skimp on dialogue and story, but the effects are solid throughout.
Yeah, and what's
like I think they're just really good. Like the Friday the 13th movies, the franchise it's fun, but it's so repetitive until you get into 7 and what is it? Yeah, 7, which is New Blood, and then Takes Manhattan.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And then I am, again, unpopular opinion, I tend to like the shit no one else does. I love Jason Goes to Hell.
Yeah, me too.
Okay.
Like there's some cool gimmicks in it, and the effects are
Yeah.
good too. Like the effects in these movies truly do stand the test of time.
Where you at on Jason Takes Manhattan? That is my favorite horror movie probably ever.
It's a
Really
fun
wild take.
movie. It's a fun ass movie. How they get from a lake into the New York City, I have no idea. But hey,
Yeah,
And it's obviously not New York City. They filmed that stuff in Canada mostly. You can tell that is not New York City.
I think they said they had one night shoot in New York, and that was it.
yeah. Basically, just the Times Square sequence.
Yeah,
I watched that movie. I've watched that movie a lot. I don't know why. I've always loved it. It has my favorite horror death ever. Julius knocks his head off on the roof. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of which, that's a nice little homage to what we will be doing in the future. And that is, of course, or foreshadowing, I should say, we are going to be covering Jason Takes Manhattan for its 35th anniversary in December. So that'll drop for Friday the 13th in December. So a little Christmas treat for you all out there. So that'll be the next film-related thing that we do. And then we'll end the year on our favorite films of the year as far as film-related programming on the ATI podcast. So, guys, I'm going to get into some analytics news and notes here real quickly. So this came out on November 16th of 1984. So I was a little surprised to see that it was not released closer to Halloween in the sense, previous or at least in October. I mean, it was kind of a post-Halloween date. I think a lot of that probably had to do with reshoots or pickup shoots, I should say, toward the end of the film as well. And then they shot 3 different endings. We'll get into some of that. But I had read that actually the casting of Nancy actually wasn't even finalized until January of that year. So it's kind of wild to think about what they did in that short amount of time, release the movie in the same year. So it's pretty crazy as well. Movies don't work like that anymore, folks. We're talking at least an 18-month turnaround in most cases. So we are back in that wonderful runtime of 91 minutes. Almost every film that we've covered this year is in the ballpark of that runtime, 91 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
I have very strong opinions about film runtimes. I'm not saying that I don't like movies that are beyond that, and I'll still watch them. But I think 90 minutes, particularly for horror genre, is a perfect runtime. It allows you to, hit the high marks, get in, get out, get off. It's punk rock cinema,
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's a perfect runtime for films like this. Writer and director is Wes Craven. We mentioned him at the open. Wes Craven, you might be familiar with some of his other work. I tell you that some of these things are appointment watching, in my opinion. I think that Last House on the Left, the original, is appointment watching if you're a horror fan. I think Hills Have Eyes is appointment watching if you are a horror fan. I'm even at least I was as a kid, I should say. I haven't rewatched it in a while. The Swamp Thing from 1982. He actually did that as well.
Ray Wise and Barrett.
Yes. And then, of course, how can you not mention the Scream franchise? Probably the most iconic original franchise out of the 90s.
Yeah.
Again, probably maybe the most successful. Probably forgetting something else here off the top of my head, but it's had a bit of a resurgence in recent years as well. I mean, those films have been somewhat critically acclaimed. The newer ones, which are not by, of course, Wes Craven. He passed in 2015.
Yeah, I throw down just a little mention of a cult classic Wes Craven film, Deadly Friend.
I haven't watched it.
There's a reason it's a cult classic and no one ever talks about it. I love it personally, but it's also just a very out there movie. And it was not supposed to be a horror film, but because Wes Craven's name was attached to it, Warner Brothers, hence New Line Cinema, was like, hey, we need some more Wes Craven. We got to get some more gore in there. So there's some random gory ass shit in a very strange yet sweet movie. I love Deadly Friend. Watch it. Don't look anything into it. Don't read about it. Just watch it. Because the first time I saw it was completely blind. It was on a recorded VHS. And a friend's like, oh, you got to watch Deadly Friend. I'm like, I don't know what this is. And it started, and I had no idea what it was about. Didn't know a damn thing about it. Then I see Wes Craven's name in the credits. I'm like, shit. Trust me, it's a treat.
I'm also a big fan of Vampire in Brooklyn, actually. That might not be like
Eddie Murphy.
Yeah.
It's a good movie.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Again, it's one of those things that came out in the 90s. I'm a 90s kid. I watched a lot of shit that probably isn't good, that for whatever reason, regardless of that, it's got a lot of nostalgia for me. And I just remember Eddie Murphy in that. He just kills it. I'm an Eddie Murphy fan. I don't care.
Yeah.
What it says. Great guy.
Nothing wrong with that. And that's, say it loud and say it proud, man.
Yeah.
What is another cult classic Wes Craven movie that I've never seen, but I have the soundtrack on my want list in Discogs because Paul Stanley from Kiss and like somebody from Motley Crue and all these like 80s rockers do like a song for it. It's like the guy that's an electric, the Shocker.
Yes.
I've never seen it, but there's a song on there that is really cool.
Decent. It's been parodied a lot in pop culture, like the Simpsons do a bit on it in particular. Yeah, so it's It's one of
It's a
those
whole-
very of the time, I'll say.
It's a Wes Craven movie, though,
Yes,
right?
it
Okay,
is.
yeah.
Well,
That's
yeah,
what,
yeah. The most popular thing that come out of it was probably Alice Cooper's song for the soundtrack, "No More Mr. Nice Guy."
Love it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So no, I love Shocker, man. I have the Scream Factory Blu-ray for that. I love that movie.
Nice. Very nice.
Yeah. Mitch Pileggi, man, fucking Skinner on X-Files. That's
Yes,
was like his first, like one of his breakout roles, for
absolutely.
X-Files.
We have to mention The Serpent and the Rainbow as well. It's another kind of
Seen that. I'm
iconic
gonna have to watch that.
Wes Craven movie.
Yes.
Very,
Yeah,
very much
I
a cult
think
following for that.
that is his like undiscovered masterpiece by far. Like
Yeah,
you can talk
good
about
shit.
all of his other movies, like it's serious and it's some scary shit. Like it's legit fucking good.
Now,
Like-
people might hear us actually talking about Wes Craven too, and be like, "Oh, well, he directed this and he directed that." Wes Craven, unfortunately, his name got a little prostituted in the film industry. We have to
Yeah.
totally, point that out. So, like, a
Unfortunately.
movie that gets very misappropriated with him is Wishmaster, in particular. When I was a kid, though, I liked it. I don't know that it holds up.
I've never
But-
seen that either.
yeah,
Like,
which-
I'm gonna have to put these on a list and see some of these.
Again, very much of the time, it had more of a life on like the rental market versus it was a flop, theatrically. I think Robert Kurtzman directed it, which he's never really directed anything to success himself. He's more notably like
who?
a TV Robert Kurtzman. He's directed a lot of
Yeah.
TV shows in particular. He's actually been working a lot with Mike Flanagan. He did some of the Haunting on Hill House directing of the episodes.
Yeah.
He does like TV. He has some TV writing credits and stuff.
Yeah, I remember Wes Craven being tied to Wes Craven Presents Dracula 2000.
Yes.
Craven Presents They
Yes.
about Wishmaster. That's just fun because you get Robert Englund, Kane Hodder, and Tony Todd on the movie.
Yes.
Different scenes.
Yeah, I think that it's not a movie to take seriously. Like, it's very camp heavy. It's just one of those movies. It's kind of mindless entertainment. I call them popcorn flicks. Mindless
Yeah.
entertainment. There's not a lot of depth
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, I love that phrase. And, the beauty about film, and some people may argue this, but I don't know why they would, it's subjective, man. That's the prime reason why I personally do not believe in guilty pleasures. I don't believe in them. You should
I don't
never
either.
feel guilty for liking something. Like, maybe it's
Oh,
not
shit.
good, but if you enjoy it,
Yep.
like,
That's all that matters.
why not? Say it loud, say it proud, man. So good.
Yeah, I mean, I say people get these high expectations about movies that they know that, like, not every movie is meant to be nominated for an Academy Award.
Right.
So you just have fun with it.
So another item I wanted to highlight was the director of photography for this film, Jacques Hatkin. And he's actually I thought it was actually kind of interesting what he's been doing more recently. What stood out to me. He's worked as a lot with like second unit crews on a lot of the big Marvel movies. So like Captain America, Winter Soldier, Black Panther, even did the Sony Venom. I did 21 Bridges, which is kind of funny to think
I
about.
like that movie.
Yeah.
Actually.
Yeah. And I got to mention, kind of infamously throughout this shooting in particular, I know Wes commented on it constantly. He constantly was wearing an eye patch to block out his vision on his non-lens eye while shooting the movie. He was very obsessive about the lighting, the framing, how everything looked. They said he was like OCD, even whenever they would go back and look at film as they were progressing along. He would get up close to the screen with a magnifying glass, and he was like, it's not dark enough in this section, or it's too bright in this section, and he would want to, do reshoots and things. So he was very much a perfectionist. And to me, one of the highlights of this film is the lighting of the film. No matter what version of this movie that you've ever watched, whether it's you saw it in a theater, you saw it on VHS, DVD, Blu-ray restorations, some of those that are out now, the lighting holds up through every platform. And kudos to these guys. That was very much intentional, mastercraft. And then the score by Charles Bernstein. Now, Charles got his big other credit is Cujo.
I love Cujo.
Which is pretty interesting. But, when you think about slasher movies, you think about iconic themes related to those main characters. Michael has his, Jason has the
Yeah.
Freddy's has that whimsical, synth driven, almost like toy piano-esque. Yeah. We just a weird eeriness to it, and of course, iconically sampled by the Fresh Prince and DJ Jazzy Jeff. You ever heard that?
What song?
It's the Friday the 13th.
Street.
A Nightmare on My
Oh,
Street.
yeah.
Yeah.
Also, didn't the Fat Boys have a song for the Nightmare on Elm Street movies?
Maybe.
The rap group? Like,
Yeah.
they're like, I thought they did like one for like Dream Masters or something.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Doc did
Yeah.
Dream Warriors for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Dream Warriors soundtrack is actually pretty slapping.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Love it.
Not too long ago, I did take
I'm
a
a
look into it.
soundtrack whore, so I need to dig into that again too.
So we're going to run through the cast real quickly. These are just the prominent speaking characters. I'm not even going to get into the lieutenant working the jail or whatever, a deputy working the jail or whatever. We mentioned her previously, Nancy Thompson, played by Heather Langerkamp. And actually, this was like her first acting role, and you're going to find that to be a common theme with a lot of these folks that we're talking about. She was basically selected for her strong facial features, and Wes felt as though that she conveyed, I guess, a strong sense of herself and an intelligence just innately, which were the key components to him casting that role for Nancy. So kind of interesting he went that route. We got to mention him. Whether you love him or hate him, one of the greatest actors objectively of all time, and that's Johnny Depp.
John Saxon. Johnny Depp.
Hey, we're going to give him some love, too.
It says, I love in the credits, it says introducing Johnny Depp.
Yeah. Yes.
And that's his first role, or one of.
Yes, it is his first. It is his first. And he iconically got the role because Wes Craven's daughters demanded that he do so. Otherwise, they're going to run away from home. And that he was just a dream. So
I didn't know that.
Yeah, that was a little bit of the influence in him picking him. I mean, he was about him, as well. He wanted him to have a certain look,
He wasn't doing 21 Jump Street yet, right? This was his first thing.
No,
right?
This is his first thing. He did that right after this.
This got him 21 Jump Street.
Yes, and he never really had another role until Edward Scissorhands, as far as film was concerned. That was his next prominent film role, that is. So yeah, Johnny Depp cutting his teeth here with a great performance. Of course, you can't talk about Freddy Krueger, Nightmare on Elm Street without talking about this man, and that's Robert Englund. Just as important as Wes Craven to the filmography, the creation thereof, is Robert Englund. He is a wonderfully trained Shakespearean actor. He actually his only major credit to this point was essentially the V miniseries, kind of created some popularity for him, so that's really the only thing that people had knew him from commercially at this time. And actually, Wes Craven originally wanted to cast stuntmen in the role, but quickly he learned that stuntmen kind of lacked the ability to project the charisma that he was looking for in the character. So that took them back toward finding somebody with a little bit more skill set, and Robert Englund knocked it out of the park. I remember seeing in some interviews with him too in his casting that he went into his friend's ashtray and put black dark circles under his eyes to even mess with his appearance whenever he came in, and he real intensely, so he came into the room for the reading, just stared at Wes Craven like he was like a crazed man. So all of these made immediate impressions on Wes, and Wes was more about believability in these casting choices first. As soon as they walk on the frame, we want to believe them as these characters.
Right.
Mondo mentioned him earlier. We got John Saxon in this movie. Lieutenant Thompson, so he plays Nancy's father. We've got Ronnie Blakely as Marge Thompson, your resident alcoholic. Cheers to that. Amanda Weiss as Tina Gray. I believe
Tina.
Yes, Tina has said at least I know it's in the 30s. I want to say it's 36 times in this movie.
He says Tina a lot.
Yeah, lot of Tina. A lot of Tina in this movie.
Well, I mean, Nancy says Tina a lot too.
Yeah, she's just as guilty. And I believe actually she was originally attempting to be in the running, that is, for the Nancy Thompson character, and did not end up getting that role herself. She ended up obviously taking the Tina role.
I'd seen the movie 1,000 times, right? And watching it last night, I'm like, wow, I guess they did kind of, like, if you go into it kind of blind, they kind of pulled a Psycho thing, which is the movie starts, it's focusing on Tina.
Yes.
Yep.
And then once Tina dies, it's Nancy's movie. It's Nancy's show after that. Like, it's not trying to make Nancy a lead character until she's forced to come in due to natural selection.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I think she was great. She was convincing, like, okay, cool, we're going to follow her in the movie. Then she fucking dies, 20 minutes in. It's like,
right. Yeah, it's totally, I mean, Wes kind of became, was one of his calling cards, right? Because Scream, that was such a huge thing with the first Scream movie, the fact that Drew Barrymore died, in the first 10 minutes of the film. So, I love whenever, directors take big risks, big moves like that, and it pays off, and it pays off in this case for sure. And then distributed by New Line Cinema, you've heard us mention that a few times here. A lot of chefs in the kitchen on this film, and usually that dooms a movie, in its making or its execution, whether that's critically or, just the whole developmental process. And this movie had a hard time getting funded, which we'll get into some of that. But New Line Cinema is a company that I will always hold near and dear to my heart as far as distribution company. I put kind of like Dimension Films in that. Like, they're just like such keys to my childhood and enjoyment of films, whether they were direct to home releases or whatever the case was.
Didn't they do the Ninja Turtle movies too?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of good stuff came through New Line. Eventually, you had, of course, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre franchise there. Eventually, once they bought it out of bankruptcy, I believe. And then, of course, Jason eventually lands there as well. So a lot of iconic horror franchises through New Line Cinema specifically. And then the budget of this film, I actually saw multiple reports on this, as low as 1.1 million. I saw it as high as 1.9. I'm going to go with 1.8 because that's the thing I saw most consistent. But we know it's in the ballpark of $1 to $2 million. Box office, though, this is where it hit it out of the park, folks. This is why they kept making these, whether they were good or bad. $57.1 million. So that's a pretty big grand slam right out the gate. It made its budget back in opening weekend.
How much money would that be today?
Yeah,
57 million. Yeah.
Yeah, you're talking probably at least 3 times as much adjusted for inflation too.
Yeah.
40 years later.
And I could be wrong here, but $1.8 million for a budget for a horror movie that was not proven, not a proven, franchise,
right.
I feel like is a lot of money in 1984 for a budget. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know.
It kind of is. Wes had made so much money on The Last House on the Left and The Hills Have Eyes because he did them so cheaply, where he got to take 3 years off. And he actually started with this movie in 1981, trying to shop it around the studios. And then that's where kind of the awesome story of New Line Cinema comes into play, because there's a lot of cool people behind the scenes there at New Line Cinema. And actually, New Line Cinema was almost on the verge of bankruptcy itself. It was kind of like the perfect marriage, because it is also known as the house that Freddy built.
Freddy built.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah, I was waiting for you to bring that up, like that fun factoid.
So reception, we've been hyping it. Let's tell you where it lands in the interwebs. We've got 7.4 on IMDb. We've got 93% on Rotten Tomatoes. We've got 87% of Google users liking this, and it's got a 3.7 on Letterboxd, which is an above average rating on Letterboxd.
That's crazy.
So this movie is, even 40 years later, even after all your Chinese trolls that try to affect your online ratings, we're looking at you, Rotten Tomatoes. We have stood the test of time. This film is critically acclaimed, applauded, loved, and that's just a few sites there that we pull from. So, guys, I think we're at the point that we're going to start getting into some heavy details in the film. I know we've alluded to some of them already. We're going to kind of talk beat for beat what happens through the movie, and maybe it'll pique someone else's interest if you guys haven't seen it. So if you have not seen this movie and you want to see it before you listen to this part of our conversation, this is where you're going to want to hit the pause button and come back and visit us. If not,
I can't imagine anyone listening to this hasn't seen it yet.
Yeah.
You never know.
Hey, maybe, yeah. I mean, maybe.
Well, I just had a coworker see it for the first time in her life last week, because apparently, is it Ronnie's, or I think was showing a 40th year anniversary showing of it. So I was like, that's crazy to me, seeing that for the first time.
Also.
Mondo talked about it. The film opens up with Tina running through it's a nightmare sequence, if you will, through some shady areas, some hallways and sweaty underbellies and pipes, and she's being chased, and she sees some very strange things, like a goat, for example, randomly popping up.
I always thought that was funny. I was just like, a goat.
Yeah, the goat thing was always bizarre to me, especially early on in watching it. And this is where we're starting to be introduced to Freddy and what he does and what his powers are, and right away grabs your attention. I feel like, just the environment is set immediately. It's striking visually. Wes has it dialed in. He's got the oil dialed in right away, creating that atmosphere, creating that intrigue. And you start getting glimpses of Freddy. And I know that there was a lot of discussion about, how much do we show and how quickly do we show. And I feel that it's always a great mark of a horror movie is that they don't give away the whole thing up front.
Mm-hmm.
I will say I was watching this a little bit more critically nowadays and just trying to look for that item in particular. And I seem to have not remember seeing as much of him as now, but also, I'm looking at a 4K restoration, and maybe the lighting's different, and it depends on what device you're watching on your TV, if it's got the backlit LED panel. So yeah, I think maybe some of that was ruined for me just because of the high quality transfer. But I would like to eventually get a VHS copy of this again and kind of just go down nostalgia lane and revisit that experience too, because that's a lot of what my memories are of this movie and how it transpires.
Mm-hmm.
So we're establishing the idea that Freddy haunts the dreams, of course, straight out the gate in the movie. Tina ends up waking from her nightmare, if you will. But we're also establishing, that Freddy can do harm in dreams, too, very early on in the film. And the fact that Freddy is not only haunting Tina, because she talks about what dreams that she's having with her friends, and then you're starting to be introduced to the other characters in this film. Of course, you're starting to be introduced into Nancy,
Rod,
Glenn, and Rod, of course. Mm-hmm. And I did skip over Rod earlier, played by, is it Jesus Garcia? I'm not really sure how to enunciate his first name, but Rod Lane. I think he in the movie is actually accredited as Nick Corey, but that's not his actual birth name. It was like a screen name that they gave him. Came to find out, I think his real name is Jesus Garcia.
Okay.
Which was I never knew that until I looked into it in preparation for this episode. So interesting enough. But yeah, you get
they're hiding some ethnicity in there apparently.
I think so. Yeah, I think so. Unfortunately, there's a lot of that. A lot of people don't realize people like Michael Keaton. That's not his real name.
Mm.
His
Douglas.
name's actually Michael
Charlie
Douglas.
Sheen's not his real name either.
Right. Exactly. There's just so many examples over the years with actors having to change their names. So anywho, we're introduced to these young group of misfits, these friends. Nancy and Tina seem to be best friends. Very quickly you establish the relationships between everybody. So Nancy and Glenn are an item, as well as Tina and Rod. That's not completely evident right out of the way, but there's a little bit of, the childish
On
flirtation.
again, off
right?
again.
Yes,
Yeah.
the childish flirtation where I'm going to mildly assault you, but I want to have sex with you.
I mean, we've all done it.
Right. So very, very childish, but
Yeah, I was thinking about like just Rod just being like you were saying, just being very childish. Yeah, he's such a tool.
absolutely
And even like Tina's sick of his shit, but she just
tolerates it.
can't get away. She
Yeah.
can't say no.
Didn't she say in the movie? She's like when they're all staying there, she's like, "Don't leave me alone with him."
Yeah.
Did you say that?
Yeah.
She's
So
like, she
so
hates
after
this
we
guy.
meet them,
Rightfully
after we
so.
meet
He's an
yeah.
ass, but
Yeah, so after we meet them, we go over to Tina's house because she's afraid to be alone. So it's like, all right, let's have everyone spend the night. And there's this ridiculous moment where Johnny Depp's like, "Oh, I'm spending the night at my cousin's house," and he's got a cassette tape that plays sound effects,
yeah.
and he's trying to use
That's
it to
great.
convince his mom. But it backfires because you hear a plane because he's like, "Oh, he lives by an airport, so I have some sound effects." All of a sudden, you hear like cars going. It's like, "What's that?" "No, Mom, it's okay. Someone's drag racing." All of a sudden, you hear gunfire, people screaming, and it's like, "No, yeah, something's going outside. Yeah, I'm gonna call the cops, Mom. Yeah, it's fine." It's like so bad, like it's so like it's not good, but it's ridiculously funny.
Yeah, I mean, it calls
Tom
back to
shows
times
up.
whenever you're a kid too. You would do similar things, to be able to stay a little bit later at somebody's house, or maybe stay the night at somebody's house you weren't actually at. Right.
I want that boombox he has there in that scene too.
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
Hey man, there was a time where where like when you wanted to blast music, you didn't have an iPod, you had a CD, and you put it in your boombox and just pump that volume up, and that's how you played it while you cleaned your room and did your homework, whatever. Like that's how we got through, man.
For sure.
There was no
Spotify.
browsing.
Yeah.
There was no Spotify.
No
right?
on-demand
We had
music.
LimeWire.
Right. Yep. I ruined many computers with that LimeWire.
Many computers with LimeWire.
Absolutely.
It's the Beetlejuice of music downloading.
Between that and CD porn sites. You're welcome, Mom and Dad. So one thing I want to mention to you right out the gate, we kind of talked about earlier on Last House on the Left, and actually that created a relationship for Wes Craven with somebody else that we've kind of tangentially been talking about this whole time and maybe not realizing that. That's Sean S. Cunningham, who's involved with the Friday the 13th franchise. He did the first Friday the 13th movie. And he actually did some second unit shots for this film as well. So he's actually involved in the Nightmare on Elm Street lore. A lot of people don't realize that. So it's kind of a cool connective tissue.
It's also not like intriguing that the other bridge of Last House on the Left to Nightmare is that one of the antagonists in Last House on the Left, his name is Krug.
Yes.
It's Krug.
I know that Wes, as far as an idea for the Freddy Krueger character, I guess we should mention too up front, is it's kind of a combination and amalgamation of ideas and events that happened over time. I know a big driving force, at least conceptually, of everything was some articles that he read in the Los Angeles Times. And it was over a 3-year period. It was about Southeast Asia refugees. And they were kind of experiencing some horrific nightmares, died in the throes thereof. And a group came to the U.S. to escape Pol Pot. And within a year of arriving, 3 men had died in all similar situations. And they were young in a lot of cases as well. Otherwise, they were healthy people. But these nightmares, it caused them to want to try and stay awake. They essentially were avoiding sleep. So they were taking wake up aids and things, as you see these kids do throughout the film. And even had I think Wes had mentioned that one of the kids had like a coffee pot running in his closet. So you even see that in this film eventually. And they were just literally would involuntarily fall asleep whenever they found they would from just straight up exhaustion. And a lot of, the terrible nightmares and stuff that they were having was on account of their real life experiences and traumas that they'd faced, which, a lot of this movie is about trauma and how you carry it with you. So yeah, it's kind of interesting that real life situation such as that is boiled deep in the seeds of this movie. Also, Mondo, you had mentioned kind of the antagonist link there. I'd also heard that Krueger, just the full enunciation of the name, really came from Wes Craven's knowledge of World War II and the SS, and that was just a pretty common name throughout those atrocities that took place there. And he wanted Freddy to be just a completely vile character. And I believe the first name Fred came from a boy that picked on him when he was younger. So that's where Fred came. And then a lot of the look of Freddy Krueger too, obviously not the burn aspect of it, but just kind of the hat and the I don't know, I guess kind of downward cowl posture, came from actually a drunk that used to walk in the streets and scare Wes Craven when he was younger, I think, like when he was 10. So yeah, it's kind of funny how this character came together. But what I love about this movie, and last week we just talked about Texas Chainsaw Massacre for its 50th anniversary, and there's some similarities here, and that is that the directors identify these strong actors and they put some of that lore into their hands to help create and flesh out the character. And Robert Englund knew that this was his chance to just knock it out of the park and make an impression. And boy, did he ever. You know, they accounted for him to come up and hit a single. Motherfucker hit a grand slam at the plate. So he did more than what he was asked to do. He came up with, you know, a lot of the mannerisms, how he would hold the glove, even how he would, you know, he kind of took from, I think it was James Cagney as well, kind of the old mobster, kind of some of the quippy and how his movements and how he walked and sauntered, which is kind of a weird thing that you wouldn't think of. And then he was also very inspired by the Nosferatu, the Werner Herzog version of 1979. So Count Orlok. So whenever you kind of think about those things, and even if you're not familiar with them and you go back and look at examples, it's all there. It's all very evident. So it's really fun to see how this was a group effort, you know, coming together and kind of creating that lore and creating that character. And I know, Mondo, you can speak to this as a filmmaker, and this is why I love having you on for this episode. I feel like the best results in movies, we're detailing these facts, but a lot of people don't know them. But that's a part what makes this movie great, what makes it pop, what makes it important, why it hit out of the park out of the gate, is the collaborative and the investment by everybody involved. Everybody wanted this to do well. Everybody knew that this was their opportunity to make an impression, and everybody came up and batted 1,000.
I mean, it's in the zeitgeist of popular culture.
Absolutely.
Freddy Krueger. I mean, it's like, you know, even if you've never, you know who Freddy Krueger is. Yeah, it's just like definitely knocked it out of the park on that one.
Absolutely.
Yeah, he's an icon. I mean, the stars truly aligned for this movie. Like, things just worked. I mean, it wasn't easy. You look at any of the interviews and everything, they had no money and not a lot of time. And I think when you're limited, it just makes you super creative and innovative. Even with no money.
You know, even one of the things that they kind of cheapskated on a little bit was even the special effects. And boy, did they just do the best with the very little. I mean, you wouldn't be able to tell.
Great.
You would not be able to tell if you didn't know.
Yeah. I mean, Tina's death scene is truly iconic, man.
Yes.
Like, it's just...
How the hell did they get her up on the roof, and she's up on the roof, and
so we're
just like...
We're basically to that point here now, so we're at the sleepover, right? And so now these kids are talking amongst themselves, and they're all starting to learn. You are aware that all of these kids are having essentially a nightmare with the same person in it.
Glenn won't admit it, but he is.
Glenn won't admit it, but he's kind of accidentally admitted it. You can tell, by his mannerisms and everything else. He's definitely, you know, been a party till Freddy Krueger's shenanigans.
He's no selling it.
Yeah, he's no selling it for sure. We break up, we split off. Now Glenn and Nancy are a little bit more wholesome, and so they sleep in separate areas. Whereas Tina and Rod shack up.
It's not Glenn's choice, because like right after Rod and Tina go inside, Glenn just goes over to Nancy and starts kissing her. She's like, "Not right now, Glenn. We're not here for us. We're here for Tina."
Yeah.
And he's like, "Man," and then, you know, and then she's upstairs in Tina's bed, and Tina are in Tina's mom's room, and then, you know, Glenn just on the couch listening to, like, you know, Rod and Tina have Olympic sex, and they're just like going, like, you hear the bed banging, the springs bouncing, and, you know,
the
like,
room was shaking. You know,
and he's just there. Glenn is just there with this dead look on his face, like, reality sucks, you know, like,
you
know, and
nice
I was talking to my wife.
We've all been there
with me, and I asked her, right?
Yeah.
And my wife was watching it with me, and I was like, "Hey, do you think they like boned? Like, Nancy and Glenn? Like, has that happened yet?" And she's like, "Probably not." I'm like, "Yeah, you're right. Like, it's because Glenn's like down for it." So when you say, like, "Oh, they're much more wholesome," it's like not by Glenn's choice.
Yeah,
right,
like,
right, for sure.
He wanted to do that, and I feel like they haven't. Even later in the movie,
I would guarantee it.
Even later in the movie, like, Glenn is in a room, and then he leaves, and her bed. She's like, "You mind? Like, get off my bed."
Yeah.
No, so.
Poor Glenn.
Poor Glenn. We've all been there.
He just left with his dick in his hand. Bless you, Glenn.
Definition of blue balls.
One other darling involved in the making of this film, a big name at New Line Cinema, of course, is Rob Shea. I mean, this guy was literally going around, Robert Shea was going around himself with film, selling film, getting the investors together for this film. Even Rob infamously wanted a few specific shots in the film. We'll point those out when we get there. Rob's a very important person in New Line Cinema. If you recall back and you listen to our episode In the Mouth of Madness, Andy Triefenbach of Destroy the Brain gave a little fan worship to Rob Shea, very important guy in horror. I recommend folks going back, checking out that episode. We get into that there, but you'll hear that name once again here throughout our discussion today. So yeah, Tina is just been cock blasted by Rod's rod. Fucked her so good she started crawling up the walls backwards. And so this is at the point where what this movie does really well is it makes you think when people are asleep, they're awake, or awake asleep.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of that flipping back and forth, and you're constantly wondering, are they awake? Are they dreaming? What's going on here? And as she starts to be pursued by Freddy Krueger in her dreams and attacked by Freddy Krueger, you start to see this enact on the screen in the real world.
Please, God.
This is God. Watch this.
Open the door!
Starts going up the wall, freaks out Rod, he jumps out of the bed, he crawls in the corner, and she's going up the wall, she's getting slashed to pieces, up on the ceiling, and then the body drops into the bed, bounces, we've got blood everywhere. One of the most gruesome, iconic scenes in any horror movie ever.
Yep.
You know?
What's great is she starts getting slashed while she's laying in the bed, and then she levitates to the middle of the room, and then it's thrown up against the wall, and then she's dragged up the wall and across the ceiling, leaving a blood trail up the wall and across the ceiling. And she's screaming in agony and pain, and it's just so fucking masterful. And you would never think that that room was rotating, because that's how they did that, you know? And it's just so innovative and just amazing. And then, because I think the only people that had done it before that was maybe
Fred
what's
Astaire.
the Cagney? Fred Astaire, yeah, and he's dancing in the hotel room. So, I mean, yeah, it's genius. And then it's sad that more people don't do that stuff. I mean, they did in Inception, which is kind of cool.
Right.
But
absolutely.
Yeah, that scene is just so damn iconic. And I like how people are just kind of like, well, this kid did it. It's like, homeboy, how did he get Tina up against the wall, drag her up the wall, drag her across the ceiling? Like, how did that happen? Like, no one questions the legit. Like, I wanted to see like some CSI shit where they kind of come in and examine, like, well, there's blood here, and she seems to have been dragged up to the ceiling and dragged across. You know, like, no one ever talks about that. Like, well, clearly this kid did it. He slashed her up. I'm like,
there's no weapon. There's no murder weapon.
Yeah, there's
nothing.
No weapon found at the scene.
Right.
Yeah, I was like, did you not fucking see the blood on the wall and the ceiling? Like, did we miss that? Are we not going to talk about how that happened? Like, well, he just cut her up, used some kind of razor. Like,
well, I mean, that's kind of classic police work, though, right? We want, we want the case closed, and we're just going to do some lazy work and make our own conclusions, right? So,
damn it, John Saxon, you're a leaf fan. You're off the case.
One thing that I love to know about Robert Englund as well is how he would just like motivate himself into doing these scenes too. I know one thing that he used kind of to jump into character right away. He was talking about the process of him going through makeup. So it took him 3 hours to get into this makeup. And they took an amalgamation of like burn victim photos that they got to kind of create that makeup. It was kind of a continued process. And so it ended up taking over 3 hours for him to get in that makeup. And one of the days that they were eating lunch, he was just noticing kind of like the young teenage actors. They were like 20-ish, most of them at the time, how beautiful they were, how little makeup and time that they had to take. And he kind of like marginally resented it. And he was like, wait, that's good. I need to use that as motivation. I need to be jealous of their youth. And so he kind of used all of these little things to kind of tap into his character even more. So it's really fun to learn all that stuff as well.
I got to say, so you said there were the people playing were, isn't there a line where Nancy says, God, I look 20. And I'm like, 20? What the? 20's not old. What are you talking about?
And she's actually 20 when she's filming that.
Yeah,
well,
she's just like 20. Like, 20's like, you're old. And,
Yeah.
I'm like, what the hell?
Right.
Because how old is Nancy supposed to be? Is she 16 or 17?
I would assume 16, but I don't remember them ever explicitly saying it.
Yeah.
I don't recall. So at this point, of course, she's dead. Everybody's kind of traumatized from it. So there's a bit of a fallout from it. Everybody thinks it's Rod. Rod's on the lam. Nancy's parents are starting to get a little bit more protective of her and what she's doing. Her mom seems to be relatively, I don't think we're even introduced to her up until this point. But we get introduced eventually to her alcoholic mother. Nancy's the alcoholic mother, that is. And you start to understand that there's a weird strain and dynamic of the relationship there between Nancy and her father. And her mother seems to be a broken home situation in the sense that, maybe divorced, not living together. She also addresses her mother as mother and not mom or mommy, but she addresses her father as daddy. So there seems to be a little bit more of an endearment there to the father, which is kind of interesting as the film goes on, because she's in the care of her mother. Not too long after this, her father entraps her to catch Rod in the streets, right? Because she's not sleeping well. She's having the horror dreams with Freddy and them herself. And she decides to go to school. She's had very little sleep. And so she goes out on the street. Rod kind of calls her off to the side.
I'm not going to hurt you.
He's not going to hurt her. Trying to tell her he didn't do it. She doesn't believe that he did it either. But her father, Nancy's father, pops out of nowhere, the old Lieutenant Thompson. And they've caught Rod. And now Rod's going to jail. He tries to escape on foot. So hell of a way to start your day off to school.
Literally escape on foot. Homeboy is running on the concrete on a sunny day barefoot. I'm like, bro,
that asphalt's got to be just on fire. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And then it's like, get down to the floor. And you see him just kind of shuffling his feet a little bit. And then he has to get down on his knees and on his stomach on that fucking hot ass asphalt. So it's like.
And he's shirtless. All he's got is like a leather jacket on.
Yeah. He's got, doing, it's hardcore.
So Nancy is pissed off at her father. Her father's like, well, it's kind of your fault. You shouldn't be going to school anyway.
Yeah.
Right?
I was like, fucking victim.
Fine father moment. Fine father moment.
Many times in this movie, they just throw shit in her face. I'm just like, fuck you.
I mean, in a way, it's almost kind of classic divorcee parent situation, It's like everybody's avoiding of responsibility. So they were definitely tapping into that, which went rampant into the 90s and 2000s. So now he has been apprehended, he being Rod. Nancy goes to school. Nancy's having trouble staying awake at school. They're reading Shakespeare, which is actually kind of a fun little trope that gets carried through all of the Nightmare on Elm Street movies. Is thematically, there's always a reading or maybe even an opening quote, whatever the case is, kind of Shakespearean related tragedies, not necessarily Shakespeare specific, but just kind of thematically. Even at some point, there's things from the Bible implemented there too in the franchise. So it's kind of just a little fun little trope that they kind of carry throughout the films as well. So she's fallen asleep to some Shakespeare, and so his corpse starts to haunt her in her dreams. And of course, we all know that this is Freddy playing his games, trying to lure Nancy into himself. This is, again, to me, one of the most probably top 3, maybe, iconic scenes in the movie when the body bag starts getting drug across down the hallway, and we got that blood trail, and it zigzags, right?
That
Nancy.
Oh God, I could be bounded in a nutshell and call myself a king of infinite space. Were it not that I have bad dreams.
Tina?
that to this day, that moment of seeing the body bag laying on the floor and the legs are lifted up and then it starts getting dragged off by itself. To this day, that shit gives me chills. Like, to this day. Watching it last night, even, I'm like, I don't like that scene. Like, it just is so wrong and unnatural, you know?
Absolutely.
And it's fucking brilliant, man. The movie is literally, pun intended, nightmare fuel. Like, there's so much shit in it that is just like...
Absolutely.
I love the hallways part where the hall monitors, like, no running, and it's an homage to Freddy. Like, she's got the...
She's all bloody, and she's got
the sweater on. Yeah, I thought that was cool.
See, no running in the halls.
Yeah, and eventually, it brings up the claw in, too.
Yeah, it was great. I love that.
So this progresses along to where we kind of... There's some set pieces that are kind of revisited throughout the dream, so a lot of what happens, even you saw it in the opening shots, things kind of resort into like a boiler room eventually. And it seems to be kind of like Freddy's playground, right? It's the area in which he wants to entrap these folks in, mostly, it seems.
Spoiler alert, it's the area where he died.
Right. And so things gravitate towards that area, and then Nancy eventually wakes up in class screaming. Teacher sends her home, back home to mommy, so she heads back home.
I think she goes to see Rod after.
Yeah, she's like, I'm concerned about him.
And,
right.
Yeah, and then she goes to talk to him, and he's like, someone else is in that room. He's like, who? You didn't? Like, what do you look like? I didn't see him. I was like, well, if you didn't see anybody, how do you know someone was there? Because he was cutting her. It's like, how do you know he was cutting her? It's like, because I could see it happening. And I was thinking, man, like, imagine the kind of shit I'm intrigued is like secondhand exposition where like that stuff happened, but imagine not seeing it, but it's being described. It's like, what would that have been like? And you're with Nancy until she starts seeing shit. Like, it's kind of terrifying. It's like just him. If you hadn't have seen what you saw, but you just hear the way he's saying it, it sounds fucking terrifying. His description of Tina being killed. And again, no one mentions like her being like, I watched her get dragged up the wall and across the ceiling. Like, he talks about she got pulled out the bed and got stabbed. No one ever talks about the wall and the ceiling. But yeah, so ultimately, you know, she's at that point, she's like, oh man, like, I don't know what to believe. Clearly something's not right.
Right.
I need some rest, so I think I'll go home and take a bath.
Right. And so this is kind of where things start to turn for Nancy herself too, where she sees this being a reality. There's something more going on here. There's something to what Rod's saying. There's, she doesn't believe that Rod killed Tina, and she needs to explore the avenues at which Tina's death took place, what the real cause of it was. But kind of simultaneously, you almost have like this subplot of, they're starting to read the tea leaves. They're starting to get a name. Freddy is the name that's floated about. I think eventually it's mentioned to the mother, and you can tell just kind of how she sells. That's a familiar name. The father at one point in the background too hears the name and kind of reacts to it. And you realize that there's something more going on here. There's something that the parents aren't telling.
Yep.
So she goes up for the bath, as Mondo mentioned, and this is maybe the most iconic scene from the entire franchise, and that is, of course, she nods off in the bathtub, and then we've got the Freddy Krueger claw coming up between her legs.
About to give her the iron claw right there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. See what the Von Erichs have to say about that one.
Yeah.
Big old bitties.
And, man, I just remember seeing that, and immediately, kind of growing up in a conservative household, of course, and, there's a naked girl in the tub. I'm probably getting horned up, because I'm deprived as a small child and not realizing what's happening to me biologically at the moment. And then that hand, it's just immediately like buzzkill. It's like we go from being horned up to like, oh, somebody's about to die. It was a very conflicting internal feelings for a young man.
I love that mother is like, Nancy, are you okay? And I warmed you up some warm milk. And she's like, disgusting. She's like,
right.
Hey, don't fall asleep in there. You could drown. For Pete's sake. And first thing she fucking does is fall asleep.
I know.
After that.
Yeah.
She's like, I just slipped or whatever. I just slipped.
And then and she's even screaming for her mother. So her mother has every right to be panicked, as she does. So, we've got the claw. She wakes up. Then she falls back asleep. She gets drugged under the water. And this is a really fun shot, too, whenever she's being drugged under the water. And you look up. I think they shot that in a pool with a tarp over the top and cut a circle over it. And they, the crew was literally in diving gear getting that shot. And I know that Wes said that he himself was like terrified that they were all going to drown just to get that little bit of footage that they did.
That's a terrifying scene to me because drowning is a fear. Like that scared me as a kid, the bathtub stuff.
Yeah, it's fucking iconic, man. Like, it's really good. That was one of my childhood fears. I was afraid to take a bath because I thought if I put bubbles in it, I wouldn't see the abyss growing under me and I get drowned. So no bubble baths for Mondo. Mondo missed out on bubble baths for a long
No
time.
rubber ducky, no bubble baths.
Oh, there were rubber duckies, but
Okay,
it was just all in the shower.
okay.
It's like, hey, there's no floating rubber duckies. They're like, rubber ducky, you're the one.
We mentioned the iconic boiler room. They actually did shoot that in a jail basement in Los Angeles. And funny enough, they ended up having to shut that place down because of asbestos poisoning. I think within 10 years of them shooting that movie. So the cast and crew was exposed to some horrendous conditions, actually. You know, if the old, what do you call them, the hazmat people would have been on that one, they would have been really upset.
Yeah,
you know?
it's not an indie film unless you're putting your health in harm's way.
Right.
It's just indie filmmaking, man, 101.
So at this point, I think Nancy's pretty much sold on the fact that Freddy can fuck with her and kill her and her friends. So I think this is about the point that she employs her boyfriend coming over, right?
Yep.
Talks to him on the phone, he comes over.
Well, he just kind of shows up because she's up late.
That's
She's
true.
trying to stay up late. She won't sleep. Right after the bathtub scene, she opens a medicine cabinet and finds some of that stay awake stuff, like pills, and then she's drinking coffee and drinking the pills and watching Evil Dead 2, the little rivalry between Sam Raimi and Wes Craven, because in Evil Dead,
Evil Dead 1 the first time.
It is Evil Dead 1, you're right. In Evil Dead, there's a Hills Have Eyes ripped poster on the wall in the cabin in the basement. So that's kind of their little banter back and forth. But yeah, she hears something at the window, and it's fucking Glenn trying to get in, and that's the part I talked about where, he lays in her bed, and she's like, "Do you mind?" And he gets up and sits next to her bed. I'm like, "In your place, son, in your place."
So they've come up with a scheme that Nancy is going to go to sleep and Glenn's going to wake her up after, I believe, 20 minutes is the time. Or I know that's at least the benchmark that's set eventually. But Glenn's supposed to wake her up. Well, unfortunately, they both fall asleep. Her plan is to kind of go get Fred Krueger and, figure out what's going on. And this is where more of those details start to become evident to her. So Glenn, he falls asleep too. The plan's kind of foiled. She nearly gets caught by Freddy in this scenario.
Right. So what happens here, in the dream, she leaves her bedroom and she's on the street and she's like, "Glenn, are you still watching?" And he pops out in the dream. He's like, "Yeah." He's behind a tree. He goes, "Yeah, I'm still watching." It's like, "Oh, fucking, you fell asleep." She's just walking down this alley and she ends up seeing the police station where her dad works, where they're keeping Rod in a cell. And she had seen Rod earlier. So then she goes in and just sees, almost like a POV through the window looking down on Rod sleeping in the cell. And then Freddy just kind of walks in and he looks up at her smiling and looks back down and kind of starts to cover Rod with the sheet, which always freaked me out.
Yes.
And then horrific moment of Tina going, "See," and then you turn around, Tina's dead in that body bag, all white, and then she's got I don't know if they're snakes or eels.
I always thought it was eels. Yeah.
It probably was. And then she opens her mouth and a fucking giant centipede comes out.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then Freddy starts chasing her, so she starts running to get home. She gets home and she's trying to run upstairs. She steps on a step and it sinks. There's it's like marshmallow or mud or something. It's kind of like the steps liquefy. She gets to her room and she's like, "It's not real, it's just a dream." Freddy's now in her room and he's slashing pillows. Feathers are flying everywhere.
Yeah, I was going to say, how many fucking feathers are in that pillow?
Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
And finally the alarm clock goes off. She yells at Glenn. And then, after a moment, she looks out the window and you see a feather floating. And it's like, holy shit. Things in my dream can come into this world.
I do want to say that it cracks me up when she wakes up Glenn. She's like, "You shit, you fell asleep." And she says, "You shit." I was like,
"Yeah, it's such the Goody Two Shoes character
to do one thing and you fall asleep. You shit."
Yes,
it's so funny.
Good stuff.
He's like, "Well, you don't get, you don't. You open your legs for Freddy, not for me." Victim blaming. I'm an asshole. Victim blaming. Terrible.
There you go. Robert Shea. Actually, that was the one scene that he wanted in that film, was her running up the steps, because it was a nightmare that he had where he was, I guess, kind of a quicksand effect sinking into the steps. So Robert Shea actually shot that piece. It was something that he demanded to be in the film. And Wes has said, as they got toward, that was actually one of the last things that was even shot for that film in general. Wes said as they got toward the end of the shoot, Robert was like, really the last 2 days, just over his shoulder, like, "We need to hurry up. Do we even need this? Do we even need that?" And they got to this point.
He's trying to get to
"You know what, Bob? This is your scene. You fucking direct it." And he made him direct that scene specifically. So
it worked out. It was great.
Kind of interesting there. So of course we're at the jail. Rod's in the jail cell. They're just wanting to go back and see him. Dad's making it a difficult time, wondering why Nancy's down at the police station with Glenn. Eventually they let him back there, and he's already in the process of being hung up. They're too late, and Rod has been hung. He is dead in the jail cell, and they have to pull the dead body out.
You see his sheets moving like a snake. They're all rolled up, kind of, and they start slithering around his neck, and that fucked me up, man. I don't think people talk about that scene enough. That scene is fucking terrifying.
Yep.
Like to know you can start moving with you being asleep. I'm like, fuck that. And when I was a kid, jump back to 4-year-old little Mondo, like I would not sleep with covers after that. I was terrified that they were going to try to choke me in my sleep. That's how much this movie affected me.
We had mentioned earlier kind of the weird nightmare that I had too, to piggyback off of that even more so. I had to have seen Freddy in the ballpark because almost all of the stuff that like terrified me as a kid was related to Freddy's powers, but I didn't characterize it with Freddy. I characterized it with the Gremlins, of course, as I mentioned earlier. But even like the sheet thing, even until I watched it here recently, I was like, you know what? That's kind of like whenever I was a kid, and I would imagine that I'd take my socks off always and throw them down on the floor next to the bed whenever I go to bed. Well, one night I woke up in the middle of the night and my socks were like dancing, like with puppets at the side of my bed. And it creeped the fuck, like scared the shit out of me. I went and woke my parents up. I believe it's the first time I saw my parents having sex from my memory too. Okay. So it was a terrible, terrible, traumatic event all lumped into one, right? I ran in on parents having sex when I was like 5 and I was like, yo, what's that?
Well, I was about to ask you, was this last week?
Well, it'd be really weird if it was last week because my dad's been dead for like 10 years.
Damn. Okay. Wow.
It's a whole new horror.
This is why you don't make jokes. Yeah. This is why you don't make jokes about people's parents. I'm just gonna be quiet the rest of the show.
Foot in mouth.
Won't say a fucking thing.
You just gonna nod the rest of the time.
We're gonna get this back. We're gonna get this thing back on the track. So
yeah, I'm just gonna nod.
Now Rod is dead. So Nancy's got a re-scheme. I believe this is at the point that she goes back home. Her mother's really advocating for her to get some sleep. Nancy's refusing to go to sleep. You know, she knows that there's something up with the Freddy Krueger thing. So she talks to her mom about it. So her mom,
and she like knocks her mom's. Well, before she
does she have the bottle of vodka, or is it like a glass of wine?
Yeah,
I can't remember.
It's a bottle of vodka. It's a bottle of vodka, but she's like, "Mom, I'm sure you're fine." All liquored up, and then her mom slaps the shit out of her.
Yeah,
she's like getting good,
loaded. And that's when they good and loaded mom, and then she's like smashes it over, like "Fuck you, bitch!" Like you're in my house, Nancy takes off, and then while she's out, whenever she gets back to the house after hanging out with Glenn or whatever, I think that's when the bar's going. She comes home, she's like, "What?"
Yeah.
And
the trellis is pulled down into the yard as well, so that nobody can climb up to the window anymore, and so on and so on. So she goes in the house, and then the mom's like, all of a sudden, like, okay, there's something to this name that you keep saying, and this is where she reveals that Fred Krueger is a child murderer, which was changed from child molester. Although in interviews, Wes Craven has, identified that was the original intent, and they kind of changed it just for fear of, they were already tiptoeing on some controversial areas for the film. So he didn't want to put that in there as an impediment either, and just wanted people's imaginations to run with it. So he's a child
remake
murderer.
took advantage of it, by the way.
Yeah.
Yes, they did.
They didn't even hesitate. They're like, "Oh no, he was." Yeah.
Yep. So you come to find out that Nancy's mother, in particular, was involved with a group of people who killed Freddy Krueger because the hands of justice were not served to their liking based on the offenses that he allegedly committed. So therefore, she actually had the original gauntlet of Freddy Krueger, and I guess their wood furnace down in the basement, and pulls it out and shows Nancy, and Nancy's, recognizes it right away too. Very traumatic event. And so at this point, all of what little skepticism maybe that Nancy has been totally validated, and she's on full guard, and she's trying to come up with a plan on how she's going to combat Freddy Krueger. And I believe this might be the point that she calls over to her boyfriend, Johnny Depp. Glenn. And they're having a conversation, and Glenn's parents are getting tired of this situation too, there's a bunch of wacky shit going on over at their house.
Glenn's dad was like, she's a lunatic.
Yeah. He's drinking a beer out on the porch. I believe it's Schlitz, if I remember correctly.
Schlitz malt liquor.
Yep. He's out there talking, and he's like, oh, she's a lunatic. And they get fed up with Nancy calling the house and talking to Glenn, and they're trying to keep each other awake. She tells him, don't fall asleep, don't fall asleep, don't fall asleep. Glenn falls asleep. This is the point that, unfortunately, Glenn is going to meet his untimely demise in another very iconic, I feel like I keep saying that, but goddamn, there's just so many moments in this movie. Glenn falls asleep listening to his record player with the TV on in his bed. His mom comes in, pulls the TV off to the side, I believe, and on one occasion, he wakes up and then he falls back asleep again. At this point, Nancy's trying to call him because she believes he's fallen asleep to make sure he's awake. They've got a rendezvous set. They're supposed to meet, I believe, at midnight or 20 minutes thereafter, yes, out in front of her house, and he's not making that appointment. Glenn has fallen asleep, listening to his record player with his TV on once again, and he starts to be pulled into the bed. Actually, they use the exact same room that they use in the Nancy death scene to create this shot, this iconic moment in the film. And then so Johnny Depp, Glenn gets pulled in through the bed. All of the items that are in his immediate surrounding, because he's got his headphones on, it drags the record player in and drags the TV in. And then all of a sudden, blood just starts blowing out of this like a hydrant. And so again, so they reused that same room, turned it upside down, and shot that fake blood out, which was actually, I believe I read it was water with red food coloring. And then they stiffened it up maybe with a little bit of cornstarch. But yeah, that was actually, it wasn't, that was self-created fake blood. So they ended up firing it up on the hole. Yep. And there was some stuff with, like the advisory boards on the editing and stuff on the rating where they had to cut things back there a little bit. I know Wes wasn't very happy about that. But goddamn, seriously, like you said, one of the most iconic moments in this film without question is the Glenn death scene, Mondo. Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely, man. Like, I like the fact that you can kind of tell now, but like the first time watching, like, how did they do that? They shot the room upside down. I guess it was the same room that they rotated.
Yes.
For Tina's death scene. Right. So it's just so surreal with all that blood blasting out and just hitting the ceiling. But it's technically just pouring from the top down. Just the room's inverted. No, man, it's sick. It's such, it was like, it was like homeboy's like got the TV on his lap. I mean, I guess.
Right.
Spring count doesn't matter anyway because he was not getting it from Nancy. So it's like finally.
I believe he was watching like a swimsuit competition or a beauty pageant or something.
She's like, well, what do you? Yeah. She's like, I don't care what they say or whatever.
Yeah, which I love because it's kind of accurate, especially if you're a young man like I was in my adolescent years, staying up for the Girls Gone Wild infomercials in the middle of the night with the on mute.
Oh my god!
Those were your opportunities, as a young man.
Or when you still get them, I'll watch like some MTV too, like late night. They'll show like some old sitcoms, and they'll have like these like phone sex ads and shit like that.
Yeah,
I'm just like, what the fuck?
They still have party lines to this day, right? Like you can call.
That's crazy to me.
I think it's free. Like you just call and just a bunch of random people talking. So it's like a 20-way call. It's like, and people are just talking like you can't even get a word in. I've only heard about this. I've never experienced it.
Yeah. I only heard about it.
So this is kind of moves things over kind of towards the final acts and movements of the film. At this point, it's basically Nancy and Freddy squaring off. So Nancy mentions a little bit before everything plays out with Johnny Depp at one point in the film, kind of one of their last day dates, if you will, that she's into survival. So she gets a survival guide and she comes up with these ideas for traps. So she starts trapping the house. She gets her mom good and liquored up and gets her to pass out. She's going to trap Freddy. So I guess we should mention, too, we kind of skipped over earlier the fact that at one point they do make her get a sleep study because she's not sleeping. Her parents are kind of at wit's end. And this is at the point that she discovers that she might be able to pull Freddy out of the dream world into the real world and actually hurt him. She pulls his hat out at that time. Yeah. So this is where she gets this elaborate ruse, this plan that she's going to pull him out of the dream world, pull him into the real world, going to have him go through these series of traps and, I guess, although never explicitly said, kill him herself. So that is the plan.
Just for fun, the guy that played the doctor doing the sleep study, did you recognize him or know who he was?
I did not, no.
That's Roger Rabbit, dude.
No shit.
What?
Yeah. He's the voice of Roger Rabbit.
Oh, man, that's awesome.
You'll recognize him. He's the mailman in Demon Knight, the guy that's obsessed with Bedelia.
No shit.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm brain farting on his fucking name right now, so I'm really like...
No, I regret not pulling it.
Who Framed Roger Rabbit is in my top 5. And yeah, that's why I know that.
I love that movie.
Well, Roger Rabbit, it terrifies me. I don't know why. Christopher Lloyd's character scared the shit out of me.
Judge Doom is fucking terrifying.
Yeah.
Terrifying.
I agree.
It's like Hocus Pocus, don't look under the bed, all that shit scared me.
Do we know who the nurse is, though, at the sleep study? Do you guys know?
Nurse?
Yes, it is Wes Craven's wife at the time.
Okay.
No
Plays
shit.
the sleep study nurse. Yes, actually.
Yeah, I know that Lynn Shay is the teacher.
Right.
I didn't
It's
know
just a
that
bit of
about the
trivia.
nurse.
I don't even know that she has a speaking part at all. But yeah, Nancy now knows that she can pull Fred into the real world, so this is her plan. She's going to pull Fred in the real world. She's got a series of traps. I believe the first one is once he gets out of the bedroom, he's going to hit a sledgehammer to the chest. As he works down, there's some tripwires to go down the steps. At some point, he is caught on fire as well by her, and again, down the steps. And she is just fucking his world up. Like, this is like Home Alone on steroids.
I was going to say, Johnny, he who saw this is like, you know what I should do? Get that kid with all these fucking traps.
It's got that kind of childlike,
It's like the Home Alone trap kind of.
Yeah,
for sure. Very much of that.
I mean, those are some cool ass traps. There's one where, like, what is it? She puts, is it gunpowder? No, not
gunpowder. Yeah, it's totally
It is
gunpowder.
Yeah, gunpowder in a light bulb.
Yes.
So when like he hits a certain tripwire, like the light bulb blows up. It was pretty fucking cool. I wouldn't have fucking thought of it.
And then like a hammer drops down when he goes out of the door, or is it a hammer?
Sledgehammer.
Sledgehammer, yeah.
It's a sledgehammer, yeah. It's like, does he go to the stomach or the balls?
In the chest. Yeah, it's just straight up in the chest, I think. Yeah. Yeah. I love it. Love it. So, it looks like that she may have defeated Freddy. She catches him on fire, calls her father in. Her father finally gets into the place. His father, this is another thing that pisses me off, just her dad this whole movie. Just like, she has this tight relationship with her dad, but, he's avoidant in believing her. He's avoiding his responsibilities. He uses her as, entrapment bait, just all these terrible things. He finally gets into the house. Him and the crew get inside the house, and it appears as though that Nancy has finally caught Freddy, and the troubles have gone away.
Well, I mean, there's just a little bit where, like, her mom is essentially burned because Freddy was on fire.
Yep.
That's right.
And got mom, and he's, like, strangling her or something.
That's right.
And she's on fire, too, and Nancy's like, no, get off her. She hits him, and then he falls on her while on fire, so she is now on fire, so they just burn to death.
They disappear into the bed.
And the dad puts the blanket over him.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then they're just gone, kind of gone, and then Freddy comes back. He rises from the mattress.
Right.
And it's just like,
you're not real.
I ain't scared of you. You're not real. What? Yes, I am. I'm your nightmare bitch. And she's like, you are. I ain't shook. And then he's just not scared of her. So, like, she's not scared of him anymore at that point because he brought him into the real world. She handed his ass to him. And now she's just like, you ain't shit. And then that causes him to, like, disappear because he has no power. Then she steps out of the bedroom door and suddenly it's kid time.
Yes.
It's mom, clean and sober. And she even says, I think I'm
done
not drinking. Drink anymore. I'm done drinking. I
don't feel like
it anymore.
Yeah.
Right. Glenn shows up in his really cool red convertible, and Tina and Brian are in the back seat, and red and green striped hood jumps up on the car and locks itself, and the windows roll up.
I'll give you the hot tour here. So as the car drives off, we've got the 1, 2, Freddy's coming for you, the nursery rhyme with the girls jumping in the background, and it cuts back. The kids realize that they've been caught by Freddy. They're going down the road, and it cuts back to Nancy's mother standing out front, waving at them, looking like a hostage victim. And Freddy rips through the door and pulls her through immediately.
Which is one of the stupidest looking things I've ever seen.
Yes, because they fucking pull a blow-up doll through there, and it's totally evident, but it's whatever,
Yeah.
They said that they were just done at that point, and they did that in one take. So they did not reshoot that, which is weird to me.
It shows.
Yes, it totally shows. They were just totally everybody was just done. They just were done with the movie. And part of that hastiness was because of the fact that they shot 3 different endings in the movie. The original ending Wes had, and if you have, a hard copy here, of course, got the whole collection there. 7 films, that is. There's alternate takes in the endings. There's 3 different endings. So this ending that you see on the theatrical release is actually a compromise. And personally, I think it is actually the best of the 3. So this is where I get kind of weird. Like when I was younger and first becoming a cinephile, I was very into like special features. I wanted to watch all the deleted scenes. I wanted to watch all the alternative endings. I wanted to watch all the director commentaries and all that stuff, which the director commentary piece of it I still think is valuable. Unfortunately, looking at director's cuts of movies sometimes, part of me is like, oh, it's the original director's vision, so it's unadulterated, it's better. It's by default, it has to be better. Unfortunately, I've seen a lot of director's cuts movies that I did not feel the same about the movie. It kind of took away, for whatever reason, it might have been the pacing of the movie or whatever. So kind of like a great example. I'll give 2 recent examples real quickly, and I'll get back on track here. One of my favorite movies of the last 10 years, Midsommar.
Mm-hmm.
Can't stand the director's cut, which I would have thought.
I've never seen the director's cut.
Completely. I would have thought completely different, and I don't want to totally ruin it, but there's some scenes in there that kind of creates an atmosphere of there's even more so things going wrong that are evident over time, stretched out over time, that should have been more red flags and to this group of kids just getting the fuck out, right? Rather than just to keep experience all these wacky, traumatic things that are happening to them while they're on this sabbatical in Swedish country, if you will. The theatrical cut of Midsommar, the pacing of it, everything just happens so quickly, like you don't even have time to digest the crazy shit that happened right before until the next crazy thing happens.
Mm-hmm.
That's why it works. Well, that's why the theatrical cut works in that sense. Where the theatrical cut doesn't work, but the director's cut does work much better, is the Justice League movie.
Snyder cut.
The Snyder cut is at least 30-40% better than the theatrical cut that Joss Whedon, which I would normally be a fan, But, after going back and reading some of what happened and took place, I totally see why that was just total trash. So the Justice League movie, the theatrical movie, is bad. The director's cut, good in that case. So the ending of Nightmare on Elm Street is actually a compromise. It is a compromise of both what folks at New Line Cinema had envisioned for him, Sean, a little bit of advice as well. But Wes's original ending to this was actually a happy-go-lucky, everything was fine. Essentially, she wakes up from the dream, mom's sober, friends are back, they drive off into the sunset, and the only thing that you get that's kind of creepy at the end is the little child's rhinestone. Otherwise, everything's good. Everything's kosher. Mom doesn't even go through the door in this ending.
I mean, that might not have been terrible.
To me, it's the best. The other alternative ending was, if I remember correctly, everything happens the same as the theatrical cut. However, whenever she gets in the car, automatically it cuts to, and it's only Freddy driving the car, and he's automatically laughing, and he just is driving down the road with her in the car. Everything plays out the same. I like the swerve, personally. I like the swerve of, you think everything's going to be all right, everything's been reset. You can tell something's not quite right. Yes, there's a bit of foreshadowing in the theatrical cut once that that hood drops over and we've got Freddy's colors across the top of the hood of the
which
convertible.
is a great little thing they did there. Love that.
I feel like the Freddy cutting to Freddy driving is just too forced and obvious. I don't know, for me, that's just me.
I personally like it.
No, I agree with you, Barrett. That does seem a little silly. I don't know. I feel like there's some kind of medium. I just, it is what it is. It's not going to change anything. I just personally I do hate her getting pulled through the window. The idea itself is cool, but if it would have been done with her like actually suffering or being pulled through that whole like gory and violent, almost like seeing vibe of Tina's death, that would have been different.
Sure.
That might have been more interesting. And I'd be like, shit. Like,
the other thing that's weird that I've never really seen explicitly explained, and other than I guess they just want to tie the colors back better to Freddy. So in the first movie, the door of the house is blue. In all other versions of other movies, whenever they allude to this, the door is red. So they made that color change too. Yeah, and I think the reason being is just because it ties more so into Freddy's. Maybe there's a higher brow explanation. Maybe because it's a dream, it's in dream sequences and flashbacks that the red. It should be red in those instances, but
it's fucking bizarre, man. I never picked up on that. I always thought the door was red. That's how we all knew it. I guess I just never picked up on the fact that
I've never paid attention to that either.
Some other random trivia. We kind of actually hit on this earlier with the Nightmare on Elm Street film having some tips of the cap to Sam Raimi's working back and forth. So in this movie, Nancy is watching the original Evil Dead from 1981, that came out before this. So she struggles to stay awake at that point. That's the TV that she has sitting in the chair off to the side of her. Craven decided to include the scene because Raimi had featured a poster of Craven's Hills Have Eyes in that film. So Mondo had made that call out earlier. It's funny, even though it's not Wes Craven directed Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Freddy's Revenge, you would also see hanging on the wall of the shed an Evil Dead 2 poster. This is in response to use of Evil Dead in the previous film as well. So kind of continued banter between the directors.
I didn't know that. That's fun.
I also, in A Nightmare on Elm Street 3, Dream Warriors, Wes Craven loaned the glove for that set to actually be used in, I guess, in the back. What is this?
Well, that's the iconic one where he has the knives and he turns them into syringes in 3 in the alley and stabs the girl with it.
Yeah.
What does he say? What's his line? He says something right before he injects her. It's like, let's get on a bitch or something like that.
I think that is what he says. I literally just saw it like 2 days ago and I cannot remember what he said.
Also where he pops out of the TV and says, "It's prime time, bitch."
Yes. Yes. I love that.
Which is an all-timer.
I don't know. I think it was 3 where it truly started. We started just calling most of the women bitches. And they made fun of it. I'm not a Rick and Morty person. I never really watched it, but
I love it.
Someone did I don't know how I found it, but I saw a clip where they're basically like, I don't know, doing like a strike at Freddy.
Yes.
And it's like a guy has both hands. It's like, it's like, "You're dead, bitch."
Yes.
Get you. It's like every freaking line ends with him calling someone bitch, which is so funny. That's basically what Freddy does.
Definitely, especially as the movies, go on. Funny enough, Breaking Bad does that. Jesse does that as a character in Breaking Bad too.
Yeah, of course.
My wife and I thought it was so funny. At one point, like we were making our little spice bottles, and so I made a salt one, and I put "salt bitch" on top of the salt for the label. It stuck with us.
I was waiting for you to put like "it's hot, bitch," like or something like that. I'm waiting for something.
Back to Evil Dead 2. So in Evil Dead 2, actually in the shed, There's kind of a rendition of one of Freddy Krueger's glove in the shed there. And then on the Ash vs. Evil Dead TV show, in honor of Wes Craven's passing, because he had just died in that same year, I believe that the glove is in the background there, or a mock glove is in the background.
No
Some scenes
shit.
there too. Yeah. So kind of cool. Cool. This is one that Jake's going to love. Pro wrestler Tommy Gilbert wrestled in Memphis as Nightmare Freddy, was a gimmick that he wrestled under. His son, Doug Gilbert, would take the gimmick over to Japan and do it in a promotion over there called Wrestling International New Generation. And then his brother, Eddie Gilbert.
Eddie Gilbert's one of the best ever.
Yes.
He's great.
In 1993, did a Michael Myers gimmick from Halloween. So they all, a family of wrestlers, essentially kind of did a slasher theme.
I never knew that Eddie Gilbert did that. I never knew that he did that gimmick, but he was a legend.
Absolutely. A very important thing for this film, too, in 2021, it was selected for preservation in the United States National Film Registry by the Library of Congress. This is like one of the most prestigious things that any film could ever, an honor that they could have bestowed upon them. So, really amazing. Unfortunately, posthumously, Wes Craven didn't get to see it happen. And it's his first movie that was selected into the registry as well. So,
you know what else made it into the registry recently, like in the last year or two? Clerks.
Oh, really?
Kevin Smith's Clerks is part of the registry now.
One of the greatest indie movies of all time.
Badass.
Absolutely.
I didn't know.
I love it.
Well deserved.
So, gentlemen, let's start things off with, does the movie still hold up today?
Absolutely.
100%, man. I mean, I think, like I said it at the very beginning of the show, I think there are bits of dialogue and some of the acting that are just like, just doesn't fly. But there are specific set pieces I think still hold up to today's standards and beyond. They tried to remake things like the wall when Nancy's sleeping and the wall moves in. That was practical. It was like a rubber sheet or something with lighting.
It's a latex sheet.
Amazing. Yep. Yeah, and it's amazing.
They spent 10 cents on it.
Right, and in the remake, they're like, "Oh, let's use CGI," and it looks like complete shit.
Yep.
And it's not scary. It's not moody. It just looked like shit. Same thing with Tina's death. So, it's an amazing sequence, and very few things can rival it. I think filmmaking has changed. Obviously, there are things that are better, and and some techniques have just evolved. But there are certain things that Nightmare still has that will never be beat on. It's revolutionary. It's iconic, and the reason it's stayed so above the grade this whole time, it's because it can't be replicated, it can't be beat, and when you try to replicate it, it's just not nearly as good. And a lot of that is Wes Craven's innovation. A lot of it is the effects people that worked on it. You said earlier, Barrett, like it's very much a collaborative effort, and without all these things being in harmony, it wouldn't have worked.
Absolutely.
And it worked so well. So I think, yes, in a nutshell, yes, it stands the test of time. It's still good, and that state is still effective.
Often imitated, never replicated. One of one.
One of one.
Yep.
We've kind of talked about what works about this film, so I'm not going to hammer back in on that point. But let's maybe get more specific. If you had to say one favorite thing, whether it's the effects, a certain acting performance, what is the one thing that you would tell a person to look out for maybe with this film to sell them on this film? If you had to rest on maybe one thing.
I think it's the effects. The effect, like literally the practical, special, I'm not like on those terms, but like just like for the time, that shit was innovative and still you remember it. You still remember all of these iconic scenes.
Right. It's certainly worthy of being the case. How about for you, Mondo?
Yeah, there's just some legit creepy ass moments, man. We talk about the bathtub quite a bit. Tina's death scene is quite a bit, but I'm going to say like the most underrated thing. I'm a fan of the underdog, so I would say the scene that's least referenced is Rod's death scene. For me as a kid, it traumatized me. Never wanted to use blankets ever again. So it's a really chilling scene. Even watching it last night, man, it's fucked up.
I will say, all the times I've seen that movie, for whatever reason, not until I rewatched it again this week as a refresher, did that scene not have the impact on me that it probably should have. So, that's my last viewing of this film.
Mm-hmm.
That Rod scene stood out to me even more so than years past. So, I think it's important as well. For me, I'm just going to have to say, I would have probably chosen Jake's point, but just for the sake of providing something different to the conversation, I'm going to have to say Robert Englund's performance as Freddy Krueger, because
truly terrifying.
He really leveled up the slasher genre in the sense that, and this is nothing against Michael Myers or Jason Voorhees up to that point, or, Leatherface.
That's why it's not as scary. Like,
right.
He speaks, and it's like the voice and just the
He's got a little bit different lore behind him than the rest of them as well. He speaks. He's a little bit more intelligible. This whole, ability to, in what's supposed to be the most sanctimonious time for a lot of people, you think, what is sleep? It's rest, This is how your body resets after what it goes through every single day. And for you to be in turmoil at those points in your life is really, that is just foundationally shaking. So just the premise of everything in general is just terrible. But, Freddy Krueger as a character, it could have been very flat. If Wes Craven would have went with those stuntmen like he originally envisioned, and I think maybe what his original thoughts were, kind of thinking, back to those other folks in the franchise, he didn't need anybody to, execute, certain lines or, have quips or whatever. And it wasn't, a focus of the original creation of Freddy Krueger. It's just something that came as time went on, and especially Robert Englund infusing a lot of himself into the character and his ideas about what the character should be and who he should be and how he should carry himself. Robert Englund himself is a huge X factor in this movie. I think without Robert Englund's performance and the credibility that he brings and the nuances that he brings to that performance, this movie could fall flat on its face. It really could.
100%, man. Like, that performance truly is pretty amazing. And, it goes to show, like, I will say this about Robert. I think Robert Englund is pretty amazing, and it's a bummer that when people get him for films, they're like, he's Freddy. He's a horror icon. Let's just put him in the movie and give him a cameo where he just says howdy and walks away. I kind of hate that he's so underutilized. I think that this last season of Stranger Things,
loved it.
They had him in an episode, and it was some of the best material he's had in forever.
Yes.
Like, they actually gave him something to do, and he's so fucking good. Like, he's so good at Freddy, but he's so much more. You were talking about, like, he's a theatrically trained actor. He's a Shakespeare actor.
Behind the mask.
He's a theater guy. Yeah.
Great in that.
Like, there's so much he can do, and it's just sad that he is never fully utilized. Like I said, Stranger Things was like the most recent thing he's done.
I think, like, kind of one of the unsung moments too, and we didn't hit it in the beat for beat moments of the movie, but we have discussed it in the fallout and the good things about the special effects. That is the scene where Nancy is sleeping and Freddy presses through. And that's actually the special effects cat on the film actually doing that scene as Freddy, where he's just coming through the latex. All they did was stretch latex over a panel, and he's just pushed. That was a one-time take. He pushed his face and his hands through, and they're like, "Oh, that looks great. We'll just use that." And it works. It's weird. So how many some like first take things are now iconic from this movie? And that made me think of when I was rewatching it here recently, because just last year I revisited Videodrome again. Again, that dental dam scene with the TV, where James Woods is interacting with the TV, and the TV's pushing through, and eventually, toward the end of the movie, the gun's pushing through the TV, where they use that dental dam stuff, again, a rubberized material to push through. And just kind of these iconic things that were revolutionary things that were going on in film right at this time, where people were just going so outside the box to create these effects. And whenever you're using practical effects very effectively in this way, and it's going to drive Jake's point home, it just creates iconic moments because it transfers very well to all these restorations as things get leveled up. If you use shitty CGI, you're seeing things like for example, it's happened with the Jurassic Park franchise. A lot of great animatronics in that film, but they've also went back and added CGI. They've done it with the Star Wars franchise, which, hasn't transferred well to higher restorations of film. They've kind of bastardized the original vision, used what you had at your resources at the time. And, it was meant to be seen that way. I'm a firm believer in it.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, gentlemen, let's take things home. Let's tell the good folks out there what we have in the works in our personal endeavors. Mondo, I know that not too long ago you had Panic Fest, but I know on the horizon here, you've got some short film viewings coming up in November. So let's talk about where folks can see some of your work coming up in St. Louis.
So we did St. Louis Filmmaker Showcase, my last short film, Bruja. Did really well. It was out of nowhere. I found out that we actually got into SLIF. I didn't think we got in, but we graduated to SLIF, St. Louis International Film Festival. We will be playing 2 nights, or 2 days, with Block of Forward Shorts. Saturday, November 9th at, Lindenwood University.
Okay, cool.
St. Charles. Yeah, we'll be there at 1 o'clock in the Arts Building, and then we'll be there the following Saturday, the 16th at 10 p.m. So 1 p.m. on the 9th, 7 p.m. on the 16th. I'm super excited about it, man. Like, it's really cool to play with some other great shorts. I don't know if you guys know Andy Compton. He did a really cool supernatural thriller short. It's very psychological, and Jackie Kelly stars in it. She took home the Best Acting Award from the showcase. She's fucking stellar. And, I could talk about her all day. She's one of my best friends. I can fucking laugh all day.
I've seen her work in person as well as on film, man.
You are in Reaper Road.
I am. Yeah.
So
Film debut. Thank you,
Yeah,
Mondo.
yeah.
He,
So
he,
we're
what's funny
actually.
about this is Mondo did not even know I was going to be in his film. I just
I had
showed up
no
there.
idea you were going to be there. I think when we played music, Brad had just said like, "Yeah." I'm like, I told Brad like, "Let's get a band together so we can shoot the scene." He's like, "Yeah, man, I know some people," and then fucking yeah. I'm like,
Yeah.
hey, what's up? Man?
Brad knew
So
that I could
funny
play
seeing you
anything,
here.
and yeah, brought Joey in, and so yeah, we
Yeah,
Bear's
right
ready
away.
for his close up.
Yeah,
Gold Dust style.
yeah. Well,
make sure you get that moose knuckle on camera.
We'll talk about it off mic. But yeah, we're gonna do some more. So we'll talk
right.
about that after.
Hell yeah.
But yeah, so Bruja's got 2 shows coming up. We're gonna polish off the Reaper Road feature shoot in early 25. We're currently in the works of we've been editing. It's been kind of quiet on our end because there's just been a lot going on. It's been kind of a slow process, but we're going to polish off the shoot and do another campaign for finishing funds. The last campaign, unfortunately, didn't do anything for us. We weren't able to get anything. But I have a trailer in the works, a new video with some behind-the-scenes stuff and some brand new perks. So there's a lot of stuff coming early 2025. So check out the Instagram. I got some promotional stuff that I'm going to drop on Halloween. I'm going to here first.
Hell yeah.
Breaking
Halloween,
news.
I will drop some shit for Reaper Road and some updates.
Nice.
And then we got a trailer coming after that, and then some crowdfunding, and then we'll finish the movie. And I'm hoping by next Halloween-ish, we will be ready to have our big premiere.
Sweet.
That's the hope and the goal.
Wonderful. Well, I'm very excited about that and had a good time doing what very little thing I did for Reaper Road. And so I'm excited to see that flesh out and just to elaborate, like seeing Jackie perform in person. I mean, I'd seen her in a couple of your shorts already, but actually seeing her in person, like I could feel it in my soul. Like it kind of shook me. And very rarely do you get those experiences in life where you actually see somebody like doing something very well and it resonating with you, and it was kind of profound, really. It was kind of beautiful.
Looking forward to seeing it. Looking forward to it.
She's a great actress. Great actress. I know that we touched last episode with Ridge on what's going on with Waxing On with R&J, but it's been a week since, so maybe you and Ridge have had further discussions. You guys are planning to record an episode as this drops, probably right before or even after it. Injunction, you guys will have a new Waxing On episode 30.
Episode 30, Waxing On with R&J. My brother and I do a show where we talk about vinyl, records, CDs, cassettes, new releases. Doesn't matter. We're gonna talk about some new. I'm gonna talk about some new releases. He's gonna talk about some new. And then for Halloween, we're gonna pick a spooky fall feel type of picks. Be on the lookout for that. Tons of shows coming up. We got our album of the year with Barrett of the ATI, where we do our album of the year show in December. So that's pretty much what we got going on. We're gonna do the Record Store Day, Black Friday show next month. So that's pretty much what we got going on for the rest of the year.
Yeah,
so,
a lot of fun shit. A lot of fun shit.
So just being, I think I mentioned earlier on the soundtrack horror, and that just means like specifically like 90s and early 2000s movies when soundtracks used to be a thing.
Yep.
Sure.
So you'll never guess what CD, not playlist on Spotify, CD I literally have in my car right now. You'll never guess.
The Batman Forever soundtrack.
I have the Batman Robin soundtrack that was playing the other day. So
which is amazing. Had the Bone Thugs and Harmony song in there.
Bone Thugs.
Love it.
REM. Yeah, it's awesome. So, I'll give you a hint. It was supposed to be a big mid-90s blockbuster. It starred Matthew Broderick and Jean Reno, the professional.
Well, Matthew Broderick, mid-90s, makes me think of the Cable Guy. Jim Carrey, but that's not it. Matthew Broderick.
After that. I think it's after that. There have been several of them before. And this was the first in a long time big screen adaptation of this character.
My God, I should have known better. Fuck.
Yeah.
What the hell?
Yeah,
Godzilla.
The 90s.
Yes.
The 90s.
Which,
yeah.
Well, we shouldn't talk about him anymore, but yeah, that is a cool song. Using the,
Green Day, baby.
Kashmir. Yeah. So it's Brain Stew by Green Day. But it's, in parentheses, it says the Godzilla remix, and it's just Godzilla roars throughout the song.
Yes.
With Brain Stew.
We literally...
And then the Wallflowers has a great cover of Heroes, We Could Be Heroes.
Yes.
By the late, great David Bowie.
Yes.
It's a great cover.
It is a good soundtrack. I have that on CD as well. I bought that when it came out. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a cool sound. Like, I'm a sucker for, like, those soundtracks. Like, Blade's got a good soundtrack.
Time and a Place.
Spawn had a killer soundtrack.
What's great about soundtracks in movies like that is they capture a time and place, what was hip at the time, what was culturally shaking folks at the time. So yeah, I'm
like that. Was it not System of the Down, but the lead singer, Serge, I think his name
Yeah,
is.
Serge talking.
He covered, was it the Blue Oyster Cult Godzilla song?
Yes.
For Godzilla King of the Monsters, which I thought was really cool.
Yeah.
And then Ghost did a song for Halloween Kills, which I thought was kind of cool. So I like that there are still singles coming out, but we don't get the full-fledged soundtracks like we used to, unless it's a Disney movie or a musical.
Sure.
Although, Awesome Mix Volume 1 was pretty cool. The Guardians of the Galaxy soundtrack.
Yeah, that's right. Yes. No, all those are great. I have Volume 1, 2, and 3.
I think the Jackson 5 is on Volume 1.
Yes.
Yeah.
I've got Volume 1 and 3 on vinyl, and 2 I have on CD.
And then Deadpool and Wolverine has a great soundtrack too.
Yeah, it's got some bangers on
there.
Still haven't seen it.
My son is obsessed with NSYNC.
Still haven't seen it.
Shame.
My son is obsessed with NSYNC now because of it.
Like Bye.
Yeah.
NSYNC. Oh,
yeah, literally that song. Yeah, it's the opening credits. And
my son is Deadpool
banger.
this year for Halloween, so he wants me to take around the speaker and play that, and he wants to do some.
So I haven't told anyone except for one of my coworkers what my Halloween costume is this year, but I'll spill it here because when will this air? After Halloween, I imagine?
Probably before? Halloween Day.
Oh,
or
cool.
the earliest.
I can see it now. I don't think like anyone gives a fuck, but anyway, I'm going to be 11 from Stranger Things.
Nice, I love it.
Cut. I'm getting a box of Egos and a hospital gun with a little bloody nose.
Great.
We're swapping the character. Why not?
There you go. Why not? Dude, that's fun. That's fun. My youngest daughter, we made her 11. We did a Stranger Things theme. Was it last year or year before? I can't remember, but my wife and I did the Chips Ahoy outfits, and my son was a Demogorgon. Aurora, our oldest daughter, was the little redheaded girl with the Sophie. I forget what her character's name is, but that cassette player. And I made Kate Bush's running up a hill on loop. Yeah, Max.
Yeah,
I made Kate Bush's running up a hill on repeat on tape for her, and so she had a little cassette player with headphones. We bought her the jacket, everything, and then the baby was 11. We got her it was actually a dog toy waffle, and so she was just chewing on that. Awesome. For trick-or-treating. Year and a half old. Yeah, it was a great time.
Cool.
Great time. We really killed it with the family costume that year. Yep, Halloween's my favorite holiday of the entire year. I was, I usually do horror theme jack-o'-lanterns. Last year I did Predator. We'll see what I do this year. I've done Alien, I've done Michael Myers, I've done Freddy Krueger. And I usually end up doing my son's because he taps out like a third of the way through it for him. It happens.
The best one I've done of recent, it was a couple years ago, kind of a deep cut, but one of my favorite bands. I did Benji Madden of Good Charlotte a couple years ago. I got the Liberty spikes, the eyeliner, and the Rancid jacket, and then I did Corey Taylor 2 years ago. So from Slipknot.
That was
sick. Barrett, did you see my costume 2 years ago when I did Paul Bearer?
Like Undertaker Paul Bearer?
That's awesome.
Undertaker Paul Bearer, yeah. I shaved my beard and just had a mustache. My hair was longer, so I combed it to the side. With the white makeup on. I had a little urn, I made a little urn.
That's great.
Walking around going,
that is badass.
That's so good.
Love Paul Bearer. Rest in
I'll send you
peace.
my picture, man.
Yeah, I've done Friday the 13th also. Yeah, I've done some really good ones.
I envy talented people, so yeah, that's awesome.
Some of them came out better than others. My Ash one year before last did not come out as well as I wanted to, but I think that year I did everybody's jack-o'-lanterns except for my wife's also, so I was I did mine last, and I was just like, fuck it, I'm going to do the easiest Ash one I could find.
Halloween night, we carve pumpkins, or I have them last several Halloweens. I've been doing the pumpkin, and I'm kind of a basic bitch. I just try to make scary faces. That's pretty much it. I don't.
There's nothing wrong with a classic jack-o'-lantern, man.
No, that's classic for a reason.
Yeah.
It's I've always been an artistic person. Like I was in art classes, I was Fine Arts Academy and stuff. Always went into art competitions and everything. And so like it's like literally the only time of the year that I sit down and kind of like flex that muscle is my jack-o'-lantern stuff. So I usually try to go all out on that. It's always a good time. So folks, we got to do a quick rundown, and then we're going to send you on your way. If you guys are not aware, again, this is all Halloween programming. We're going to have a special playlist actually on YouTube for you. So it's going to be the episode details. You can find that on our YouTube channel as well. It's going to have things sequentially there. It's going to have all the ATI podcast episodes. We're going to have the Waxing On episode once that's completed as well on the playlist. And then Eddaw's in this weekend. Brandon Stewart is recording another episode of Narb's Closet that will also be on that playlist. All special for October as a part of our programming. So we started things off with episode 123 with Andy Triefenbach, In the Mouth of Madness, for its 30th year anniversary. Episode 124 was our Lord of Illusions episode with Brendan Wilkinson from Squint. We were celebrating their album Big Hand, which actually came out today and is a wonderful album. I recommend folks check it out.
St. Louis's very own.
St. Louis band. You guys are putting St. Louis on the map. Sunday Drive Records. If you like Drug Church, this band is for you. That's the biggest modern comparison that I can make for you folks. So 125 with Doug Wicker, Search Party Pictures, mutual friend of ours. Covering The Guest for its 10-year anniversary is out there right now. Highly recommend. We did episode 126, our first anthology film. We covered Three Extremes, a wonderful cultural event through 3 different Asian directors, South Korea, Hong Kong, and Japan. And one of my favorite directors of all time, Park Chan-wook, does a short on their cut. So we did that with Eli LaChance of Nocturne Books and Media and Dana King of It's Just Two Movies. And then our last episode I mentioned earlier, Texas Chainsaw Massacre. We did that with friend Marcus Newstead of Fister Path of Might, Daybringer. He's in a lot of St. Louis bands, formerly of Last Flight Home down here, McCree, post-hardcore band out of St. Louis. Episode 127 was dedicated to us sitting down and watching, doing watch-along style, Texas Chainsaw Massacre for its 50th anniversary. We had Ridge from Waxing On with R&J on that episode. I had so much fun. It was fucking criminal. I think a lot of people are going to laugh. I don't even normally laugh at my own shit whenever I'm editing it, and I was laughing my ass off as I was editing this episode. This will be out by the time that you're listening to this, so can't recommend, even if you're not watching along with this, I think that there's some extremely funny moments that you can still really enjoy with that episode. So check it out.
That's awesome.
Our next episode, we're going to be back kind of on our normal programming, and it's actually, I'm really excited about this. I've made friends with a content creator on Instagram called The Hardcore Dropout, and he does a really great job of highlighting new music as well as going back and a lot of what I consider to be very monumental albums and my fandom into the underground and following music in that realm. He touches on, and boy, man, he's just a wealth of knowledge. So if you're looking for new music, he's definitely a recommended follow on Instagram. But we're going to get to know the Hardcore Dropout on episode 129.
Looking forward to that as well.
Looking forward to that episode. Mondo, we thank you so much for your time tonight, sir. And we're really looking forward to...
It's very nice to meet you, Mondo. Very nice to meet you.
You too. It's a fucking pleasure, man. I always love shooting the shit. And, I haven't BS and BS, so it's always great to share my knowledge of bullshit.
Hear that, son. I'll drink to that one, sir.
Yes, sir.
I'm all out of beverage.
Well, we're going to let you get back to the liquid deaths. We're going to stay on the alcohol.
Yeah.
And we thank you all out there. Be safe. Happy Halloween, all. Hey there, this is Barrett from the ATI Podcast, here to talk about what we have going on the ATI Podcast Network. First, we'll start with Waxing On with R&J. The format of Waxing On with R&J is audible selections made exclusively by our hosts and brothers, Ridge Jackson and Jake Jackson. Waxing On with R&J is sure to tickle your inner eardrums with some of the most vile tones you've ever encountered, and conversely, ear candy with pop melodies, focusing on spotlighting underground and rising artists. Waxing On with R&J is another outlet of the ATI podcast community to bring awareness to many musicians' craft. Also found on the ATI Podcast Network, Nod Narb's Closet, hosted by Brandon Stewart of Edos Inn. Nod Narb's Closet is a wing of the ATI podcast programming that delves into the world of role-play games, miniature painting, diorama making, occasional pro wrestling match watch-alongs, providing commentary with a dash of jocularity and satire, and much, much more. Of course, leading the pack is the ATI Podcast. On the ATI Podcast, we episodically invite guests onto our show to spotlight their talents, whether that's musicians, filmmakers, artists, actors, businesses, even athletes. Nothing is off the table. The focus of the ATI Podcast and its collective creative arms, whether that's Waxing On with R&J or Nod Narb's Closet, is to bring awareness and focus to people's talents. Be sure to follow us across all traditional podcasting platforms, and for the full experience, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Just search the ATI Podcast. Stay safe out there.